Good
Hi,
morning.
Adrienne. Good morning. Sorry for the delay, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We are at Gabriel's Cafe here in the AT&T Conference Center on the beautiful University of Texas at Austin campus. Thank you for joining us for our inaugural episode of Leading with Integrity. We're joined today by the Associate Vice President for Human Resources at the University of Texas at Austin, Adrienne Howarth-Moore.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here.
And great cup of coffee already.
Yeah, right.
This is a good start to the day.
A good place for coffee, AT&T Conference Center. So I'm going to start with 3 standard questions that I'll be asking of everybody, and I'll close with 3 standard questions. And our first question to you with this whole series, at least tentatively right now, is called Leading with Integrity. So Adrienne, what does leading with integrity mean to you?
Ooh, that's a big question. Thinking about that. And I think for me, it's really about role modeling the behaviors that you expect of others in your team. One example is I really value work-life balance. And I've learned through the years that if I stay late all the time, if I'm constantly working on weekends, and I say the words that I value work-life balance, but my team sees me not leaving, not taking vacation, not doing those things, it can then have a chilling effect. There might be a misperception that, well, if she stays that late, I have to stay that late or else I won't be rewarded. And so I think really role modeling the behaviors. So now I take that into consideration a lot differently. Really matured in that area of saying I need to role model the values that I say are important in the team. I think owning it, when you make a mistake, for me, integrity is about admitting you've made that mistake and really talking about how can we make that better? How can we mitigate that? And encouraging my team to own it and having them feel comfortable that when there has been an error, that it's okay to say it. Let's say it, let's get to the solution. And then I think lastly, it's being willing to do what I ask my staff to do. If I'm asking my staff to do something that I would not be comfortable doing, then I really have to ask myself, is that the right thing to be doing? So that's what leading with integrity means.
I mean, I think the definition of integrity is making sure that your actions align with your values. So I think that's a big part of what you're saying. You have to make sure that you're acting with integrity. That's good. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So our next standard question is, and this is going to be maybe a tough one, but we'll see. In 2 minutes or less, tell us your career story. So how did you get to where you are today professionally?
Okay. I have a winding path road to how I am where I am. So some people are aware of this, but I started off, I'm a registered nurse. So I graduated from UT, so, hook 'em horns, graduated with my bachelor's degree from UT and went into nursing. But I had spent my whole kind of undergraduate experience working full-time in a manufacturing facility. So when I was getting ready to leave and go off and take that first nursing job outside of school, I had a leader at that high-tech company that just took an interest. Really, nothing I had asked for. I actually was surprised and was unaware he did it, but he had met with some of the benefits team and human resources team at that company and really asked the question, why are we letting Adrienne leave? Just because she's going to be a nurse. And absolutely an advocate. And so his name was Bill McKean. I still keep in contact with him today. And so he really, kind of just set the path that I could work in high tech with my nursing degree. So when a job opened up, I applied for it. I was lucky enough to get that job. And that started an 18-year career working for Motorola and Freescale Semiconductor. Working in the high tech space, I worked in the facilities organization, the environmental health and safety organization, human resources organization. I did community relations and government relations work. So it really just gave me a broad breadth of experience. And then I had a health interruption. I had a brain tumor diagnosis, and that really took me by surprise. I was not expecting that in my life. It had a devastating impact on my health. I'm actually 4 inches shorter than I used to be. I broke 13 bones in my back. The tumor just caused all kinds of crazy. And I started to really assess, is this the career path that I want to be in? Because when I got through that tumor situation and got through having the surgery and going through the rehab, I realized I was a lot stronger than I thought I was. And so I started to assess, is this it in terms of my career? And I saw a job opening at UT. And I just said, you know what? If I was brave enough to have brain surgery, I should be brave enough to kind of break out and try something new.
That's great.
And so applied for the job here at UT and got through the third round. And I thought, ooh, this is serious. I had a great manager at my company, my former company. He was so supportive. And I made the switch, and I have not looked back with regret. It's been wonderful. I'm just moving into other areas of HR here. And so that's how I got here.
That's great. Thanks. That's a great story. Last standard question here. What do you suspect or know bothers other people about you as a leader? Or it's not the same question, but what's your leadership weakness?
Well, I have many. And you're not supposed to admit that, when I give coaching on how to do interview techniques. This is always a tough question to coach on. Yeah. But I think if I go back to what I started with you have to own it and you have to be honest. And so I think that for me, it is, we have such an amazing team in HR with such just skillful clinicians of the HR work. Right. So when I hear things happening on campus and people talk about things they want to work on, I am the first. I get so excited and I'm just like, oh, I've got a team that knows how to do that. I've got people in my team that I know could help you. But that might lead to overcommitment. And so we also have a resource constraint. And so when I think about, from an integrity perspective, keeping your commitments, I sometimes will get so excited about the things that my team can do that I may overcommit. And so from a resource perspective, we can't always meet all the things that I'm excited about.
So you take it personally, the whole team is sort of personal. Yeah.
So I think that that's an area that I just need to continue to work on and seek counsel from my own staff. And before I commit them, ask them, hey, there's this great opportunity. Do you have the bandwidth? And so that's really making sure that I engage with them.
That's great. Good. Thank you. So on a personal note, early in your life, you had a realization that you wanted to go into healthcare, and you said that was sort of an early discovery for you. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I was in high school, I was in theater and drama and saw all of my friends, applying and going to New York or California and really pursuing a theater experience, a theater career. And I guess I knew enough about myself to know I just wasn't that talented. And so I thought, wow, am I good at being a wait person? Because that might end up being my reality if I don't make it as an actress. So I was working in a movie theater. Again, I love theater and the cinema, worked at a movie theater. And I was getting off work late at night. I'm aging myself. There was no cell phones at this time. And I witnessed a car accident. It was a rollover accident. And I didn't know what to do, but I went to the vehicle. It was upside down, and there was a person pinned inside. And they were obviously frazzled. And at that time, I didn't know medically what was going on. And now I know it was shock. But I just crawled inside and I held their hand.
Wow.
And when I left that experience, first parents were mad because why was I coming home so late?
Oh, your parents were mad.
Yes, my parents were mad, and I had no cell phone to let them know why. But I came, at 1 a.m, I said, Mom, Dad, I think I can be a nurse. I think that that's something I can do. And again, I think how it translates to HR is I spent a lot of time studying human health and how you make an appropriate diagnosis, and you really want to treat the diagnosis and not just symptoms to find a cure. And so I think about organizational health. When someone comes to me with a concern involving their team, their department, let's not just treat the symptoms. Let's really find out what's going on in that department. So I think that interest in healthcare has really helped me with my interest in HR.
And problem solving in general.
Absolutely.
That's interesting. Good. So you talked a lot about your work in the private sector, and then you started working here at UT, not the private sector. So tell us a little bit about that transition of what it was like going from the private sector into working for the University of Texas at Austin.
It was a challenge, a fun challenge. I'll say that. It was a fun challenge, but it was a challenge. Things that I just didn't know. I mean, higher ed was completely new to me. Being, kind of on the public record. I mean, one thing was just people, they said, oh, Adrienne, I Googled you, and like, you're out there, in the private sector, it's private. So that just coming to the realization that you're serving the public in a different way, that you really are, it's a mission focused organization, and that we are here to serve the state of Texas, our students, and internationally, the students that come. So, we really say what starts here changes the world. And I really believe that. Like,
yeah.
I've drunk the Kool-Aid. And so that change was big. Technology was a big change. When I came here, we still had some paper timesheets. I had come from high tech, so I don't think we had paper timesheets probably since the 70s.
Yeah.
So things like that, just kind of coming into the world of looking at what technology could do to make our university more efficient. And then really bringing here some ideas. There was a lot of talk on campus around wellness at that time. We didn't have a wellness program that was formalized. A lot of people were doing a lot of things very kind of decentralized. And so coming here and meeting with staff council, this is an organization and body on campus made up of, all employees, and really working with them on creating a wellness role and how we can bring that to a university setting. So again, I think all of the experience I had in high tech, where we had a very well-established wellness program for over 20 years, I was able to translate that here so that we as UT didn't spend a lot of time kind of messing up. It's like, let's take the lessons learned from others who have done it before. And so I'm really proud of that work that we did with staff council on that.
Yeah. So how are we doing now in terms of technology and wellness programs? I mean, relative to the private sector, have we started to catch up?
Well, I think, when you're in the day-to-day, sometimes you can beat your head against the wall a little bit and say, oh, we're not there yet. We need to continue to do that. And I think that's true. And yet, last night, I went to a meetup. It was a people analytics meetup. It was hosted by Macomb's Business School. And
Ethan Burris, right?
Ethan Burris, yes. And I just loved it. And it was a network of people interested in technology, human resources, diversity and inclusion analytics. And I was there with Google and Oracle and Indeed and a lot of companies that we would classify in the high-tech world are being modern and cutting edge. And we were all struggling with the same things.
Interesting.
So it really made me feel like, even though we were talking about struggle, it actually made me feel good because I thought, hey, we were talking about workday issues. They were talking about workday issues, meaning we're all on the same platform. So I was really proud that we were having the same struggles as our high-tech partners.
Safety in numbers.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Good. So what would you say is the biggest or the most serious problem facing leadership today?
I think that struggling with how to manage transparency. I think that our workforces today they demand to know more about how we make decisions as an organization. And there are some cases where we could be more transparent and we just choose not. And how can we move that needle culturally? But then there's also cases where, for legitimate reasons, we have privacy issues and needs that we have to manage. And so how do we manage that need and desire for transparency from a workforce that, especially with our millennial workforce and even our iGen, those younger than millennials, they expect that level of transparency, but we have to balance that still with some regulatory requirements around privacy. So I think that that's a big issue for leadership. And then I also think our workforce development. We need to start thinking about our modern workforce and how are we preparing that modern workforce? How are we recruiting for it? So to me, diversity, really tapping into a variety of pools of talent that maybe we haven't tapped into before, and how do we do that and leverage it? Yeah,
that's great. So those of you who are watching this, you may have noticed me sort of scrolling through. I'm trying to keep track of people who are going through our Facebook feed while we're streaming live to Facebook. But we also have Michelle Bennett here, and she's keeping an eye on it. And you should know that if we don't have time, Adrienne will be able to answer a few questions after the fact, because this is going to actually be recorded on Facebook Live. So feel free to ask questions. We might not be able to get to them right now, but Adrienne will at least try and answer a few of them when we're done today. So moving on to our interview. So sorry if I seem like I'm not paying attention. I am. So we talk a lot about ethics today in general, and certainly at UT, it's an extremely important topic for us these days. What are some considerations that we need to have in mind when we talk about ethics at the University of Texas or in higher education in general?
Yeah, well, I'm really proud of the work that UT is doing in this area right now. You know, President Fenves is deeply committed to an initiative called Honor Texas. And I think that there's a committee of really smart people that are really thinking through the issues of ethics and how best to do that. And for me, one of the areas that I think we need to really, you know, dig deep into is what are the ethical frameworks that we need to make our decisions by? You know, I've actually taught a class on healthcare communications, and we talk in class about ethical frameworks and ethical decision-making in healthcare. And there's not necessarily just one ethical framework.
Right.
You know, you need to think about what's the situation and which one do you apply, because what I've seen happen is, just for an example, someone will use a legalistic framework. So as long as it's legal, it's ethical.
Right.
Well, I don't know if that's where we want to be.
Right.
Is that the bar?
Right.
And so I think that there's really important work going on right now here at UT where, you know, going out and having dialogue and having some of our faculty members that teach ethics and study ethics really dig deep into hearing from staff and faculty about what are the issues on campus we face and what are those ethical frameworks that we need to set for ourselves as our standard as we make decisions on this campus.
Right. I mean, there's plenty of examples and precedents in law historically that we know now were abhorrent ethically. And so we need to be cognizant of those things.
Yeah.
That's great. So what are some mistakes that we could be prone to in discussing ethics or educating people on ethics? You sort of mentioned some of that already.
Yeah.
But,
I think we need to make sure that we create, not just when we say we want an ethical environment, there's more to that than just the talk about ethics. I think we have to think about workplace civility. For people to make good decisions and feel comfortable reporting a concern, they also have to feel comfortable that when they report that concern, that it's in a safe environment, that they feel as though their concern will be addressed and that there won't be repercussions for reporting a concern in good faith. So I think that, you know, along with ethics, we need to think about what's workplace civility, where are we at in that area, how can we strengthen that so that people feel as though this is a safe environment. If you make a mistake, do you feel safe to say I made the mistake?
Right. A psychologically safe environment.
Absolutely. I also think about incentives. I think we need to be really careful about how we create incentives around things. I'll just draw upon some of my experience in the safety realm. I worked for a company that we really prided ourselves on being what was called OSHA Star certified. And we could really say we were a safe company. But we would go out and benchmark from time to time other companies because we'd say, well, why are their numbers better than ours? How can we continuously get better? But one of the challenges we saw were that when companies would use a very strong incentive base, for example, you know, give away an amazing prize for having a certain number of days where there was no injuries reported, when I would actually go talk to the practitioners in that area, the safety professionals, they would admit that there was probably underreporting occurring because an employee didn't want to be the one person who had an injury that month.
Right.
So they underreported, and that person maybe went without health care, or worse, a safety concern was not actually investigated, and it left a potential for somebody else to get hurt the next day or the next week. So I think we just have to be careful that we don't, how we incentivize or penalize things can have an impact on how comfortable people are in reporting.
Metrics can be a dangerous thing.
Yes. Yeah.
So is it hard to be an ethical leader?
I think I would, I think I have to say, you know, there's always going to be hard. You know, hard is part of being a leader. But I really do believe it can be freeing if you dial in to your value compass. What's your compass and what are your values? And if you dial in on that, then actually as you make the decision itself, I think, is easier because you know how to make the decision. This is the ethical framework I'm following. So even though you might hear kind of all of these different nuances to the story, you can make the decision. The conversation with the person may still be hard.
Sure.
But I think the decision itself is actually made easier when you dial into that compass and you know that you're making the right decision based on the framework from which you're operating. Yeah.
So can you tell us about, can you think of a time when you faced an ethical dilemma?
There's been a lot in my career. I'll just use an example in the benefits area.
Okay.
This is one that I think is, you know, benefits are designed to be equitable. And so we have group health plan rules, IRS governed rules. And so I think, you know, working from that framework of making sure that we maintain an equitable framework for that is so important. And yet you may have the situation where someone with a title that sounds important has neglected to make a benefits election decision. And you might receive calls from various people. This person's important. Are you aware of this esteemed professor's legacy? Are you
Positional
aware?
authority?
Absolutely. All the good things that they've done for the institution. Couldn't we just make an exception in this case that they forgot to sign up for their benefits enrollment? But by making that decision, we put in jeopardy our group health plan, which would have a devastating impact for the whole, for all of the participants in our health plan. So I face those decisions regularly, but I think that that's where I have to lean in on the ethical framework, right, so that we can make the best decision for the whole.
Right. So what do leaders need to do? And you talk with your ethical framework, I think you sort of answered this question, but is there anything else that leaders can do to avoid ethical missteps? Any advice other than the framework?
Yeah, I think surrounding yourself with diversity. I think that, you know, making some of these decisions is hard. And if you make the decisions in silo, I think that that can lead to maybe not the best decision making. So I think it's really important to surround yourself with diverse thought, having people on your team that are able to challenge you, and making them feel comfortable to challenge you. I know my mind has been swayed. You know, I've had really good dialogue with some of my staff members about how to interpret a statute. And I really appreciate when they are willing to say, Adrienne, I respectfully disagree. You know, I see it this way. And so I think surrounding yourself with diversity, diversity of thought, diversity of gender, of race, of background, socioeconomic status. These are all things that help lead to, I think, better decision-making. So I think that that's important.
Great, thanks. So we have, I think, just enough time with our standard close. This is from the questionnaire from the French television show. Just kidding. So there's 3 questions here. What was the hardest thing you have had to do as a leader?
I've done many hard things, but I think the one that really comes to mind right now is I had to do a reduction in force of my own staff. And I had to let go of 3 individuals who were excellent performers. And so I think when you let go of a staff member, it's always hard, regardless of circumstance, but especially when there's absolutely no performance concern. It was simply a budgetary limitation, and we had to eliminate a shift. And so the entire shift staff had to be reduced. And that for me was just so challenging. And I made in my opinion, a misstep. There was a deadline, and the company asked that all exits occur within a certain time frame. These staff were remotely situated, so I couldn't be at 3 places at one time. So I had to make a decision to kind of outsource the conversation to another colleague that worked at a different site. And in hindsight, with greater maturity now, that was a company deadline. I think I should have pushed back harder and really said, these 3 people report to me. It's important from a dignity and respect perspective to do it myself. And I should have asked for an extension in the deadline, and I should have met with each person myself. So that's something that I've learned from, is what are internal deadlines? What are real deadlines?
What are arbitrary deadlines?
Absolutely. And so, yeah, that was, I think, one of the hardest areas that I dealt with as a leader.
Great. What are you reading right now?
Oh, I love fiction. And so, and I'm one of those people, I always have probably 3 or 4 books at the same time. So I just finished this weekend Where the Crawdads Sing. Yes, and The Silent Patient. And so
I don't know The Silent Patient.
Yeah, it's a thriller mystery. And I love fiction because I think it gives you a chance to practice empathy. You can really just dive into that character, someone that is completely different than yourself, and really start to practice empathetic thinking. It's putting yourself in the place of someone else. And so I really think as a thought exercise, you know, we can read leadership books, and I do that. I read the business books and the leadership books, but I always try to at least once a month, infuse it with a fiction book so that I can do that practice.
It also helps the creative side of our mind keep working, and it helps us step away from that working about our industry and leadership and management, so that we can have some space to really think about it in different perspectives. So last question, give me 2 key pieces of leadership advice.
Ooh. Never be afraid to ask for help. As a leader, if you think you know it all, I think that's dangerous. I think so. Yeah, always be willing to ask for help, seek counsel from a good colleague or 2. Really, again, surrounding yourself with people who you can go to and ask that good advice. And then I say, try new things. As a leader, you never know where that next idea is going to come from. So in fact, I'm getting ready to try something new myself. And so I've signed up for a triathlon.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
And so, and so I'm going to try to swim. I'm going to try to bike, and I'm going to try to run. And I'm already meeting up with people who are very disciplined and far more disciplined than myself. And so it's a new community of people that I don't normally engage with. And I'm already learning, how do they go about their day to fit these things in? How do they prioritize differently than I'm prioritizing? And so I just think, as a leader, you have to always be willing to try new things. So
when is it?
It's in May.
In May, okay.
It's in May, yes. It is in San Antonio. Okay. So anybody else interested, try the triathlon with me. We can do it together.
Exciting, good for you. Well, that is all the time that we have today. Thank you all of us for joining. Feel free to share this link on Facebook for people who didn't have time to watch the live stream. Again, it will be recorded. And we're going to be, next week, we'll try and post it on our LinkedIn group page, which is Learning and Development at the University of Texas. Feel free, we'll post that link in the comments of this Facebook stream, and feel free to join that. And we will post a abridged version of this interview down to 10 minutes so that it's more like a podcast. And as we mentioned before, this is just the inaugural episode, and we'll hopefully start having regular episodes beginning in February. If you have other suggestions for leadership experts or leaders throughout the University of Texas community, feel free to add those to the comments as well. Thank you all so much for joining us today for Leading with Integrity. Thank you, Adrienne.
Thank you, Damel.
Good job. Thanks. You did too. Good job. That was fun.
That was fun.
And I think we're right on time, even though we started about a minute late. But that's not too bad, again, for the test.
I know, and for me, because I'm a talker, so I was like, oh.
Facilitation, right? That's good. Well, thank you so much. And you can go back and watch it if you want. Otherwise, you can just go to the feed and you can see the comments.
Yeah.
This is great.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you
I'm
being
really
here
excited. I'm so excited. I'm excited now to think, who are you going to do next?
Well, let me know if